In just a few moments, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will give an address before a joint session of Congress. This marks a historic fourth speech in front of Congress for Netanyahu, more than any other foreign leader so far to the U.S. The last time the Israeli leader addressed a joint session of Congress was in 2015. So he's speaking today at the invitation of House Speaker Mike Johnson, and we see that footage here. Here is this House Speaker. Netanyahu will be making his case for the U.S. to continue supporting Israel in its war against Hamas. It's also come under attack from Hamas supporters, Iran and Hezbollah. Some Democrat lawmakers plan to boycott the event. They're dissatisfied with Israel's offensive in Gaza. Hundreds of protesters have descended upon the Capitol Hill as well. So, we're expecting thousands, actually. Netanyahu is also scheduled to speak with both President Biden and former President Donald Trump today. So joining us live to discuss this historic address and its implications now is NTD news contributor Mike Leon. Welcome. Always great to have you with us, Mike. And looking forward to getting into the nitty-gritty of this because it is such a historic moment. First up, though, just to let our viewers know, you are the Policy and Strategy Director of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation and the host of the News Commentary podcast, Can We Please Talk? What's your assessment up front about what this really could mean and its significance?
Hey, Steph, good to see you always, first and foremost. This is very interesting. We're at a weird time right now in American politics right now, right? What has happened over the last 3 weeks, I think in the history books is going to be something where people are not going to believe they lived through it, right? An assassination attempt of a former president, the current president and incumbent stepping down, and then obviously the Democratic Party giving a new presumptive nominee to the vice presidential candidate. So the timing of Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu coming here is something that's going to put the spotlight back on the war that's happening in Gaza, the hostages that are still outstanding. I'm interested to see, with respect to this speech, what's going to come of it, because right now, Bibi's approval rating in Israel is very low. Remember, before October 7th, Steph, there were protests that were happening back in Israel, different Supreme Court decisions that were happening in Israel that were causing some folks in Israel to question Bibi Netanyahu's government and now the philosophy behind, some of the things that they were carrying out over there in Israel. So there was already a little bit of, a turmoil happening there, to put it mildly. Right now, with the subsequent events of October 7th and the way the war has been playing out, and the fact that there are still over 140 or so hostages that are still remaining, he needs to answer for some of these questions. And not to mention, thousands of Palestinians are dying. And we have seen different times where Palestinians have moved in different directions all throughout Gaza, only to, be blown up. Let's put it bluntly. And the U.S. giving $95 billion in aid recently in a package that got approved through the House and Senate is part of why I think he's coming here to speak to Congress, to talk about the funding that they're receiving, what the offensive is looking like, what's the strategy going forward, because there's a proposal on the table right now from President Biden and the administration to have a ceasefire and get back the hostages, and it just hasn't been agreed to on the Israeli side. So all of this, I say, Steph, to say that it's very interesting, not only given the timing you mentioned, the historical factor of this fourth time speaking, but also now what comes forward from here, because this is going to put a huge spotlight back on the...
I hear you there, Mike. That tapered off right at the end, but these are great points that you're making. The whole array of significant events surrounding this one being an historic event itself. But we did see they were almost about to start, but I believe we have a bit more time. We can see the footage there of, it looks like Netanyahu approaching and getting a warm welcome with lots of clapping from the joint session of Congress. And it does look like a lot of people are there, although you noted some dissent, of course, within Israel, but also here in the U.S. There are some members of Congress who are not attending, who would usually have been there, notably Kamala Harris, VP. She's said to be meeting with him later on, but has made it known that she won't be there. What do you think of the reception so far and how that could potentially impact U.S.-Israel relations going forward?
Yeah, so it's been tepid, right? I was speaking with a member of Congress on the Republican side of the aisle, and he's already been, I can kind of say it here because he already put a statement out earlier today, Representative Thomas Massey, who said, I'm not going to be attending this. I don't want to be a pawn in this process. And there's been other members on the Democratic side as well, Representative Jamal Bowman, who I spoke with just last week before this speech was announced that he was going to be coming here to the U.S. The same thing, right? Like they didn't want to be a part of this. And Kamala Harris, I know you were just talking about it, Steph, before. She actually was giving a speech today in Indianapolis. Again, obviously, with the events that have unfolded this past week, and now she needs to go out there and campaign. You know, she already had that set up. So again, the timing of all of this is very weird. But we're going to see from this speech how members of Congress are going to feel after this. Is this the same old Bibi? Is there an emphasis on, getting back the hostages and figuring out the actual solution to this war? Because I think that's what members of Congress really want to hear. Because at the end of the day, we're also contributing money and aid into all of this.
Yeah, and yet Israel's message throughout has been fairly consistent that they don't want to negotiate with Hamas terrorists, or that the fact that the negotiations they have done so far haven't really panned out. So what kind of message do you expect today as we're waiting for this speech?
Well, I mean, if you've ever watched any of Netanyahu's speeches, a lot of them are very focused on the elimination of Hamas, right? Which, again, I've had former military analysts that have come on my program that said, to wipe out an ideology based on a military strategy is not the way to go about doing that. So how you can eradicate an ideology that's not the way to go about and approach it, right? So the issue is that we all agree that Hamas is a terrorist organization and they hide amongst their civilians. We agree about that, but the execution of how you actually target these the militants in Hamas, it's very tough to do. So I think what I want to hear from this speech is really a solution, a light at the end of the tunnel.
And I want to hear more on that, Mike, but it does sound like Netanyahu is just about to begin. We'll pause for a minute and just see if that is moments away. Okay, you hear the applause there.
Thank you. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Senator Ben Cardin, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senators, members of Congress, distinguished guests. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the profound honor of addressing this great citadel of democracy for the fourth time. We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization. It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life. For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together. Because Because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose. And my friends, I came to assure you today of one thing: we will win. Ladies and gentlemen, like December 7th, 1941, and September 11th, 2001, October 7th is a day that will forever live in infamy. It was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. It began as a perfect day, not a cloud in the sky. Thousands of young Israelis were celebrating at an outdoor music festival. And suddenly, at 6:29 a.m., as children were still sleeping soundly in their beds in the towns and kibbutzim next to Gaza, suddenly heaven turned into hell. 3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. They butchered 1,200 people from 41 countries, including 39 Americans. Proportionately, compared to our population size, that's like 20 9/11s in one day. And these monsters, they raped women, they beheaded men, they burnt babies alive, they killed parents in front of their children, and children in front of their parents. They dragged 255 people, both living and dead, into the dark dungeons of Gaza. Israel has already brought home 135 of these hostages, including 7 who were freed in daring rescue operations. One of those freed hostages, Noor Gamani, is here in the gallery, sitting near my wife, Sarah. On the morning of October 7th, the entire world saw Noah's look of desperation as she was violently abducted to Gaza on the back of a motorcycle. I met Noah's mother, Leora, a few months ago. She was dying of cancer. She said to me, "Prime Minister, I have one final wish. I wish to hug my daughter Noah one last time before I die." 2 months ago, I authorized a breathtaking commando rescue operation. Our special forces, including a heroic officer named Arnon Zmora, who fell in this battle, rescued Noah and 3 other hostages. Noah, I think it's one of the most moving things. When Noah was reunited with her mother, Leora, and her mother's last wish came true. Noah, we're so thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you. Many hostage families are also here with us today, including Eliyahu Bibas. Eliyahu Bibas is the grandfather of those two beautiful red-headed boys, the Bibas boys, toddlers. And they were taken hostage with their mother and Eliyahu's son. The entire family was taken hostage. Two beautiful red-haired children taken hostage. What monsters. And with us also is Iris Chaim, whose son, Yotam, bravely escaped Hamas captivity with two other Israelis, and tragically they were killed making their way back to our lines. We have with us also the families of American hostages. They're here. The pain these families have endured is beyond words. I met with them again yesterday, and I promised them this: I will not rest until all their loved ones are home, all of them. As we speak, we're actively engaged in intensive efforts to secure their release, and I'm confident that these efforts can succeed. Some of them are taking place right now. I want to thank President Biden for his tireless efforts on behalf of the hostages and for his efforts to the hostage families as well. I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel after the savage attack on October 7th. He rightly called Hamas sheer evil. He dispatched 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East to deter a wider war. And he came to Israel to stand with us during our darkest hour, a visit that will never be forgotten. President Biden and I have known each other for over 40 years. I want to thank him for half a century of friendship to Israel and for being, as he says, a proud Zionist. Actually, he says, a proud Irish-American Zionist. My friends, for more than 9 months, Israel's soldiers have shown boundless courage. With us today, is Lieutenant Avichai Reuven. Avichai is an officer in the Israeli paratroopers. His family immigrated to Israel from Ethiopia. In the early hours of October 7th, Avichai heard the news of Hamas's bloody rampage. He put on his uniform, grabbed his rifle, but he didn't have a car. So he ran 8 miles to the front lines of Gaza to defend his people. You heard that right. He ran 8 miles, came to the front lines, killed many terrorists, and saved many, many lives. Avichai, we all honor your remarkable heroism. Another Israeli is with us here today, and he's stand up right next to Avichai. This is Master Sergeant Ashraf al-Bakhiri. Ashraf is a Bedouin soldier from the Israeli Muslim community of Raat. On October 7th, Ashraf, too, killed many terrorists. First, he defended his comrades in the military base, and he then rushed to defend the neighboring communities, including the devastated community of Kibbutz Be'eri. Like Ashraf, the Muslim soldiers of the IDF fought alongside their Jewish, Druze, Christian, and other comrades in arms with tremendous bravery. A third hero, Lieutenant Asa Sofer, is also here with us. Asa fought as an officer in the Tank Corps, and he was wounded in battle. He was wounded in battle while protecting his fellow soldiers from a grenade. He lost his right arm and the vision in his left eye. He's recovering, and incredibly, within a short time, Asa will soon return to active duty as a commander of a tank company. I just learned there is a fourth hero here, Lieutenant Jonathan Ben Chamo, who lost a leg in Gaza and continued to fight. My friends, these are the soldiers of Israel, unbowed, undaunted, unafraid. As the Bible says, Am kelavi yakum. They shall rise like lions. They have risen like lions. The lions of Judah, the lions of Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, the men and women of the IDF come from every corner of Israeli society. Every ethnicity, every color, every creed, left and right, religious and secular. All are imbued with the indomitable spirit of the Maccabees, the legendary Jewish warriors of antiquity. With us today is Yechiel Leiter, the father of one of those Maccabees. Yechiel's father escaped the Holocaust and found refuge in America. As a young man, Yechiel moved to Israel and raised a family of 8 children. He named his eldest son, Moshe, after his late father. Moshe became an exemplary officer in one of our elite commando units. He served with distinction for 2 decades while raising 6 beautiful children of his own. On October 7th, Moshe volunteered to return to combat. 4 weeks later, he was killed when a booby-trapped mine exploded in a tunnel shaft right next to a mosque. At his son's funeral, Yechiel said this: "If the state of Israel had not been established after the Holocaust, the image engraved in our collective memory would have been the photograph of that helpless Jewish boy in the Warsaw Ghetto holding his hands up in the air with Nazi rifles pointed at him. But because of the birth of Israel," Yechiel continued, "because of the courage of soldiers like my son Moshe, the Jewish people are no longer helpless in the face of our enemies." Yechiel, please rise so we can honor your son's sacrifice. And I pledge to you and to all the bereaved families of Israel, some of whom are in this hall today, the sacrifice of your loved ones will not be in vain. It will not be in vain because for Israel, never again must never be an empty promise. It must always remain a sacred vow. And after October 7th, never again is now. My friends, defeating our brutal enemies requires both courage and clarity. Clarity begins by knowing the difference between good and evil. Yet incredibly, many anti-Israel protesters, many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas. They stand with rapists and murderers. They stand with people who came into the kibbutzim, into a home. The parents hid the children, the 2 babies, in the attic, in a secret attic. They murdered the families, the parents. They find the secret latch to the hidden attic, and then they murder the babies. These protesters stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves. They refuse to make the simple distinction between those who target terrorists and those who target civilians, between the democratic state of Israel and the terrorist thugs of Hamas. We recently learned from the National Security Director, U.S. Director of National Intelligence, that Iran is funding and promoting anti-Israel protests in America. They want to disrupt America. So these protesters burn American flags even on the 4th of July. And I wish to salute the fraternity brothers at the University of North Carolina who protected the American flag against these anti-Israel protesters. For all we know, Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots. Some of these protesters, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing, some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC. These protesters chant from the river to the sea, but many don't have a clue what river and what sea they're talking about. They not only get an F in geography, they get an F in history. They call Israel a colonialist state? Don't they know that the land of Israel is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob prayed, where Isaiah and Jeremiah preached, and where David and Solomon ruled? For nearly 4,000 years, the land of Israel has been the homeland of the Jewish people. It's always been our home. It will always be our home. It's not only the campus protesters who get it wrong. It's also the people who run those campuses. 80 years after the Holocaust, the presidents of Harvard, Penn, and I'm ashamed to say my alma mater, MIT, couldn't bring themselves to condemn the calls for the genocide of Jews. You remember what they said? They said, it depends on the context. Well, let me give these befuddled academics a little context. Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred. For centuries, the massacre of Jews was always preceded by wild accusations. We were accused of everything from poisoning wells to spreading plagues, to using the blood of slaughtered children to bake Passover matzahs. These preposterous anti-Semitic lies led to persecution, mass murder, and ultimately to history's worst genocide, the Holocaust. Now, just as malicious lies were leveled for centuries at the Jewish people, malicious lies are now being leveled at the Jewish state. No, don't applaud. Listen. The outrageous slanders that paint Israel as racist and genocidal are meant to delegitimize Israel, to demonize the Jewish state, and to demonize Jews everywhere. And no wonder we've witnessed an appalling rise of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. My friends, whenever and wherever we see the scourge of anti-Semitism, we must unequivocally condemn it and resolutely fight it, without exception. And don't be fooled when the blood libels against the Jewish state come from people who wear fancy silk robes and speak in lofty tones about law and justice. Here's a case in point. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has shamefully accused Israel of deliberately starving the people of Gaza. This is utter, complete nonsense. It's a complete fabrication. Israel has enabled more than 40,000 aid trucks to enter Gaza. That's 500,000 tons of food. And that's more than 3,000 calories for every man, woman, and child in Gaza. If there are Palestinians in Gaza who aren't getting enough food, it's not because Israel is blocking it, it's because Hamas is stealing it. So much for that lie, but here's another. The ICC prosecutor accuses Israel of deliberately targeting civilians. What in God's green earth is he talking about? The IDF has dropped millions of flyers, sent millions of text messages, made hundreds of thousands of phone calls to get Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. But at the same time, Hamas does everything in its power to put Palestinian civilians in harm's way. They fire rockets from schools, from hospitals, from mosques. They even shoot their own people when they try to leave the war zone. A senior Hamas official, Fatri Hamad, boasted, listen to this, he boasted that Palestinian women and children excel at being human shields. His words, excel at being human shields. What monstrous evil. For Israel, every civilian death is a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy. They actually want Palestinian civilians to die so that Israel will be smeared in the international media and be pressured to end the war before it's won. This would enable Hamas to survive another day and, as they vowed, to carry out October 7th again and again and again. Well, I want to assure you, no matter what pressure is brought to bear, I will never allow that to happen. The vast majority of Americans have not fallen for this Hamas propaganda. They continue to support Israel. And I want to say thank you, America, and thank you, senators and House members who continue to support us, continue to support Israel, continue to support the truth, and see through the lies. But as for the minority that may have fallen for Hamas's cons job, I suggest you listen to Colonel John Spencer. John Spencer is head of urban warfare studies at West Point. He studied every major urban conflict. I was going to say in modern history. He corrected me, no, in history. Israel, he said, has implemented more precautions to prevent civilian harm than any military in history and beyond what international law requires. That's why, despite all the lies you've heard, the war in Gaza has one of the lowest ratios of combatants to non-combatants casualties in the history of urban warfare. And you want to know where it's lowest in Gaza? It's lowest in Rafah. In Rafah. Remember what so many people said? If Israel goes into Rafah, there'll be thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of civilians killed. Well, last week, I went into Rafah. I visited our troops as they finished fighting Hamas's remaining terrorist battalions. I asked the commander there, how many terrorists did you take out in Rafah? He gave me an exact number, 1,203. I asked him, how many civilians were killed? He said, Prime Minister, practically none, with the exception of a single incident where shrapnel from a bomb hit a Hamas weapons depot and unintentionally killed 24 people. The answer is practically none. You want to know why? Because Israel got the civilians out of harm's way, something people said we could never do, but we did it. These heroes here today, the heroic soldiers of Israel, should not be condemned for how they're conducting the war in Gaza. They should be commended for it. I want to thank all of you here today who forcefully opposed the false accusations of the ICC and stood up for the truth. These lies are not only libelous, they're downright dangerous. The ICC is trying to shackle Israel's hands and prevent us from defending ourselves. And if Israel's hands are tied, America is next. And I'll tell you what else is next. The ability of all democracies to fight terrorism will be imperiled. That's what's on the line. So let me assure you, the hands of the Jewish state will never be shackled. Israel will always defend itself. My friends, in the Middle East, Iran is virtually behind all the terrorism, all the turmoil, all the chaos, all the killing. And that should come as no surprise. When he founded the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Khomeini pledged, "We will export our revolution to the entire world." We will export the Islamic revolution to the entire world. Now ask yourself, which country ultimately stands in the way of Iran's maniacal plans to impose radical Islam on the world? And the answer is clear. It's America, the guardian of Western civilization and the world's greatest power. That's why Iran sees America as its greatest enemy. Last month, we heard a revealing comment, ostensibly about the war in Gaza, but about something else. It came from the foreign minister of Iran's proxy, Hezbollah, and he said this: "This is not a war with Israel. Israel," he said, "is merely a tool. The main war, the real war, is with America." Iran's regime has been fighting America from the moment it came to power. In 1979, it stormed the American embassy. It held scores of Americans hostage for 444 days. Since then, Iran's terrorist proxies have targeted America in the Middle East and beyond. In Beirut, they killed 241 U.S. servicemen. In Africa, they bombed American embassies. In Iraq, they supplied explosives to maim and kill thousands of American soldiers. In America, they actually sent death squads. They sent death squads here to murder a former Secretary of State and a former National Security Advisor. And as we recently learned, they even brazenly threatened to assassinate President Trump. But Iran understands that to truly challenge America, it must first conquer the Middle East. And for this, it uses its many proxies, including the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Yet in the heart of the Middle East, standing in Iran's way, is one proud pro-American democracy, my country, the State of Israel. That's why the mobs in Tehran chant death to Israel before they chant death to America. For Iran, Israel is first, America is next. So when Israel fights Hamas, we're fighting Iran. When we fight Hezbollah, we're fighting Iran. When we fight the Houthis, we're fighting Iran. And when we fight Iran, we're fighting the most radical and murderous enemy of the United States of America. And one more thing. When Israel acts to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons that could destroy Israel and threaten every American city, every city that you come from, we're not only protecting ourselves, we're protecting you. My friends, if you remember one thing from the speech, remember this. Our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight. And our victory will be your victory. Ladies and gentlemen, that victory is in sight. Israel's defeat of Hamas will be a powerful blow to Iran's axis of terror. Another part of that axis, Hezbollah, attacked Israel on October 8th, a day after the Hamas attack. It has launched thousands of missiles and drones against us. 80,000 of our citizens in northern Israel evacuated their homes, becoming effectively refugees in their own land. We are committed to returning them home. We prefer to achieve this diplomatically. But let me be clear. Israel will do whatever it must do to restore security to our northern border and return our people safely to their homes. Last Friday, a third Iranian proxy, the Houthis, attacked Tel Aviv with a deadly drone. It exploded a few hundred feet from the American consulate, killing one person and injuring 9. On Saturday, I authorized a swift response to that attack. All our enemies should know this. Those who attack Israel will pay a very heavy price. And as we defend ourselves, on all fronts, I know that America has our back. And I thank you for it. All sides of the aisle, thank you. My friends, for decades, America has provided Israel with generous military assistance, and a grateful Israel has provided America with critical intelligence that saved many lives. We've jointly developed some of the most sophisticated weapons on earth. I choose my words carefully. We've jointly developed some of the most sophisticated weapons on earth that help protect both our countries. And we also help keep American boots, we help keep Americans' boots off the ground while protecting our shared interests in the Middle East. I deeply appreciate America's support, including in this current war. But this is an exceptional moment. Fast-tracking U.S. military aid can dramatically expedite an end to the war in Gaza and help prevent a broader war in the Middle East. In World War II, as Britain fought on the front lines of civilization, Winston Churchill appealed to Americans with these famous words: "Give us the tools and we'll finish the job." Today, as Israel fights on the front line of civilization, I too appeal to America. Give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster. My dear friends, the war in Gaza could end tomorrow if Hamas surrenders, disarms, and returns all the hostages. But if they don't, Israel will fight until we destroy Hamas's military capabilities, end its rule in Gaza, and bring all our hostages home. That's what total victory means, and we will settle for nothing less. The day after we defeat Hamas, a new Gaza can emerge. My vision for that day is of a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza, but for the foreseeable future, we must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror, to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. Gaza should have a civilian administration run by Palestinians who do not seek to destroy Israel. That's not too much to ask. It's a fundamental thing that we have a right to demand and to receive. A new generation of Palestinians must no longer be taught to hate Jews, but rather to live in peace with us. Those twin words, demilitarization and de-radicalization, those two concepts were applied to Germany and Japan after World War II, and that led to decades of peace, prosperity, and security. Following our victory, with the help of regional partners, the demilitarization and de-radicalization of Gaza can also lead to a future of security, prosperity, and peace. That's my vision for Gaza. Now, here's my vision for the broader Middle East. It's also shaped in part by what we saw in the aftermath of World War II. After that war, America forged a security alliance in Europe to counter the growing Soviet threat. Likewise, America and Israel today can forge a security alliance in the Middle East to counter the growing Iranian threat. All countries that are at peace with Israel and all those countries who will make peace with Israel should be invited to join this alliance. We saw a glimpse of that potential alliance on April 14th. Led by the United States, more than half a dozen nations worked alongside Israel to help neutralize hundreds of missiles and drones launched by Iran against us. Thank you, President Biden, for bringing that coalition together. The new alliance I envision would be a natural extension of the groundbreaking Abraham Accords. Those accords saw peace forged between Israel and 4 Arab countries, and they were supported by Republicans and Democrats alike. We could call I have a name for this new alliance. I think we should call it the Abraham Alliance. I want to thank President Trump for his leadership in brokering the historic Abraham Accords. Like Americans, Israelis were relieved that President Trump emerged safe and sound from that dastardly attack on him, dastardly attack on American democracy. There is no room for political violence in democracies. I also want to thank President Trump for all the things he did for Israel, from recognizing Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, to confronting Iran's aggression, to recognizing Jerusalem as our capital and moving the American embassy there. That's Jerusalem, our eternal capital, never to be divided again. My dear friends, Democrats and Republicans, despite these times of upheaval, I'm hopeful about the future. I'm hopeful about Israel because my people, the Jewish people, emerged from the depths of hell, from dispossession and genocide. And against all odds, we restored our sovereignty in our ancient homeland. We built a powerful and vibrant democracy, a democracy that pushes the boundaries of innovation for the betterment of all humanity. I'm hopeful about America because I'm hopeful about Americans. I know how much the people of this country have sacrificed to defend freedom. America will continue to be a force for light and good in a dark and dangerous world. For free peoples everywhere, America remains the beacon of liberty its extraordinary founders envisioned back in 1776. Working together, I'm confident that our two nations will vanquish the tyrants and terrorists who threaten us both. As Israel's Prime Minister, I promise you this: no matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult the road ahead, Israel will not relent, Israel will not bend. We will defend our land, we will defend our people, we will fight until we achieve victory. Victory over liberty, rather victory of liberty over tyranny, victory of life over death, victory of good over evil. That's our solemn commitment. And we will continue to work with the United States and our Arab partners to transform a troubled region from a backwater of repression, poverty, and war into a thriving oasis of dignity, prosperity, and peace. In this noble mission, as in many others, Israel will always remain America's indispensable ally. Through thick and thin, in good times and in bad, Israel will always be your loyal friend and your steadfast partner. On behalf of the people of Israel, I came here today to say, thank you, America. Thank you for your support and solidarity. Thank you for standing in Israel, with Israel, in our hour of need. Together we shall defend our common civilization. Together we shall secure a brilliant future for both our nations. May God bless Israel, may God bless America, and may God bless the great alliance between Israel and America forever.
You can see the lawmakers there in unison clapping for the Israeli Prime Minister. Still standing, many standing ovations throughout his speech. That went for about half an hour. All right, and as he heads out, you can see many lawmakers there in attendance. There were some who did not show up, but for those who were here, a very warm welcome. And a warm welcome for his message, which was heavily focused on the alliance and the importance of the alliance between Israel and the U.S. For Israel and for the U.S. He said that the point of this alliance and what they're working on today is defending our common civilization against. Okay, with a focus on Iran as the major threat. But we're here now joined by Jonathan Tobin. He's editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. Welcome so much. Good to have you with us, Jonathan. First, to start off, what are some of your key takeaways from this historic moment?
Well, this is the speech that Benjamin Netanyahu has been wanting to give to the American people, sort of unfiltered by the bias of the corporate mainstream media. In it, he laid out Israel's case. That was the whole point. He started very clearly saying this isn't a clash of civilizations or, about Israel and the Palestinians, that it's a clash between barbarism and civilization. And that's something that, the mass demonstrators, however many of them are on the streets of DC, and those who have been attacking Israel, criticizing it, to sort of the intersectional left wing of the Democratic Party have lost out on. They don't understand that this is orchestrated by Iran, that the war was started by Iran and its proxies with terrible atrocities, and that their ultimate goal is to attack the West and the United States, not just Israel, and that in essence, Israel's doing America's dirty work for it, fighting these terrorists, and that it deserves American support. And it was nice to see bipartisan standing ovations for these important points. And unfortunate that Kamala Harris, our vice president, and the presumptive Democratic presidential candidate, was so afraid of the photo op and the video of her standing above Netanyahu as she stood above Volodymyr Zelensky when he addressed Congress, that she decided to boycott this event.
And how do you think that could impact, potentially U.S.-Israeli relations, her absence? What message does that send?
Well, it sends a clear message. She was sending a clear message to left-wing Democrats saying, I'm really on your side if you're against Israel. I know, she often says things that are pro-Israel and then balances things which are harshly critical or recycling Hamas propaganda and lies about Israel. She has tried to sort of play it both ways, talk out of both sides of her mouth. Obviously, if she wins in November, I think relations between the U.S. and Israel, which have been good at times, but also very tenuous at times under Joe Biden, will be much worse. There's no question. As much as Netanyahu rightly tried to emphasize bipartisan support for Israel, he thanked Biden and the Biden administration for what it has done to support Israel in terms of the arms supplies, even while an implicit criticism saying you have to fast track these arms, don't slow walk them, but also name-checking President Trump, thanking him for all of his pro-Israel deeds while he was president, and the Abraham Accords, which I imagine will make his meeting in Mar-a-Lago on Friday a lot more pleasant.
And we just lost the footage there, but that session has concluded. And I hear what you're saying there. There have been protests. There were, Netanyahu referred to them as well, the protests in D.C. today on the day of his speech. He actually called the protesters useful idiots for Iran. Could you lay out the argument there for Netanyahu?
Well, clearly, if you watch some of the footage, just as if you watch the protests on college campuses and in the streets of our cities, most of these people are not merely calling for a ceasefire. You can make an argument for a ceasefire, even though that basically means letting Hamas off the hook, especially when you were doing it months ago, and letting them escape, justice for committing the largest mass slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. But if you're in the streets chanting from the river to the sea, calling for the destruction of Israel, in support, recycling libels about Israel and the Jewish people in this war, you're doing Iran's bidding. You're also basically recycling tropes and memes that are anti-Semitic. Let's not put too fine a point about it. If you're for Hamas, you're for a genocidal terrorist movement that wants to not just destroy Israel, but to commit the genocide of its 7 million Jews.
And Jonathan, Netanyahu also alluded to this and spoke a bit about it, but what do we know so far about who are organizing these protests?
Well, there has been some reporting and well-sourced about who's funding it. Some of it comes from the Middle East. Some of it comes from the far left. Some of it comes from the Soros foundations. These aren't libels. These are very highly organized groups like the Students for Justice in Palestine and other anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic groups have gotten funding. But also it represents, let's not just put it on evil foreign, actors or, it's not just a conspiracy of bad groups or a few people. These arguments, the things that people are saying in the streets of DC and on college campuses, and we'll see that again when school starts in September, I'm sure, they are a manifestation of the entire woke left-wing way of thinking about the world. This intersectional lies about Israel and the Jewish people being white oppressors, being settler colonialists in the land of Israel. That's why Netanyahu talked a bit about Jewish history, that they're not just saying something that's wrong about a conflict today, they're denying Jewish history. In essence, what you're doing is denying the history and the rights of the Jewish people. You're justifying efforts to slaughter them. And this is rooted in this sort of neo-Marxist woke catechism that has been adopted throughout academia, some of the media, and some of popular culture, and indeed, sometimes echoed by the Biden administration. And this enables this anti-Semitism. In essence, DEI and critical race theory and intersectionality grant a permission slip for anti-Semitism, and that's what we're seeing in the streets of DC today and throughout America when these pro-Hamas, anti-Israel demonstrators speak.
Jonathan, all these topics are so hot right now, not just in terms of Netanyahu visiting, but of course on the table, even in hearings, congressional hearings, and other aspects of recent events in politics. Really wish we could dig into it more with you, but that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. Great to speak with you as always.
Thank you.
And next up, during the address, a crowd of protesters gathered around the perimeter of the Capitol demanding that Netanyahu be arrested. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez joins us live from the Capitol to talk about that. Luis, We just watched Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. What was his main message?
Yes, of course, Steph. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a historic fourth address to a joint session of Congress. He began by thanking the United States for its support in its current war against Hamas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also thanked President Biden for his more than 4 decades of friendship, quoted President Biden for saying that he was an Irish-American Zionist. But also Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his main message towards the end of his speech was asking for the military aid to Israel to be expedited. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu referred to the historic Winston Churchill address to a joint session of Congress during World War II when he asked American lawmakers to give the United Kingdom the tools to finish the war. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this time modified the phrase and asked American lawmakers to give Israelis the tools faster to finish the job faster, Steph. So the main message was that to thank the U.S. for its support, to condemn the protesters and those who are rejecting Israel's right to defend itself, and to, of course, expedite all of this military aid to end the conflict as soon as possible. Steph.
Certainly. Now, Luis, what can you tell us about Democrats' threat to boycott the speech and the reaction that lawmakers had to Netanyahu's speech?
Of course, Steph. Well, it's important to note that before today's speech, it was expected that anywhere in between 50 to 100 Democratic lawmakers would boycott, would skip this speech. We know that Vice President Kamala Harris, who's the president of the Senate, decided to not participate in today's joint session of Congress. She's instead in a campaign in Indiana, and the president pro tempore of the Senate, Senator Patty Murray, also refused to participate. But it was very interesting, Steph. From what I could gather from the inside of the chamber, there were less than 10 seats empty in all of the joint session of Congress. I also saw Democratic congressmen like Richie Torres effusively applaud Benjamin Netanyahu when he mentioned American hostages. So it was definitely a different mood than we expected, and it was also very different from 2015, last time that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at a joint session of Congress, where close to 60 lawmakers skipped that speech.
Now, with all the security there, what did protests look like?
Of course, well, we know that around the perimeter of the Capitol, there are protests demanding the immediate arrest of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Capitol Police swore in yesterday over 200 NYPD officers, so police officers from New York, came down to D.C., were sworn in as special officers of the Capitol to provide protection for today's event. National Park Services expect in between 5,000 and 10,000 protesters to be outside of Capitol. And of course, we can cut now to these sound bites from the protests, where there were encounters in between pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian protesters. Let's listen.
Fundamentally, this is political theater. Netanyahu knows how to play the audience in Congress. He's here to make reassurances to them that everything is under control. But the people around the world have seen very clearly that things are not under control. They have been unable to achieve their objectives. What they've done instead is indiscriminately targeted civilians to try and break the spirit of Palestinians.
We're all here for the same reason, right? We're all here for lives that are suffering and being lost. So specifically, my motivation is that these kids who are no longer with us would have at least a few last words in the fact of their appearance, and that they would not be totally forgot.
Steph, back to you.
Thank you so much, Luis. Good to speak with you. And coming up, the FBI director testified this morning on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. What he said about the probe into the shooter's motive after the break.
Hi, I'm Tim Che, the director and writer of The Firing Squad. You can participate in our Million Souls campaign, inviting everyone you know to Jesus. Listen, we all face some kind of firing squad in our lives, and yet faith in the Lord, that challenge can lead us to true peace in this insane world. We can't do it without you. We're competing with big Hollywood movies, so we're relying on your voice to spread the word. Thank you again for supporting this important movie.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Your gift will show them they're loved. Homeless young people are afraid and alone with nowhere else to turn.
You want to know that there's somewhere you can go that's safe. So the Covenant House did that for us.
Please call now with your gift of $19 a month. We'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. Please don't wait. Your gift is the lifeline a young person needs now. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org. Thank you for saving precious lives.
Investigating the assassination attempt of former President Trump. Congress today holding the third of 3 hearings. The FBI director tells lawmakers what we know about the shooter and his motive. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the highlights.
FBI Director Christopher Wray testified before the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday. Now, among other things, lawmakers tried to find out why the shooter tried to kill former President Trump and what the FBI knew about him before the incident happened. Here's how it went.
There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of rhyme or reason to it so far.
Wray told lawmakers that the FBI is currently looking into the shooter's personal devices, his social media accounts, and more. So far, without much success.
We do not yet have a clear picture of his motive. You might see a manifesto, things like that. We're not seeing that yet, but we are digging in hard because this is one of the central questions for us.
Wray explained why the FBI didn't make much progress yet. He says that even after they got their hands on the phone, new challenges popped up.
It turned out he was using some encrypted messaging application.
And again, the same question relative to the bombs: was this pretty sophisticated, or is this is the kind of the norm you see with folks like similar situation? How would you describe
on this subject? I would say this has unfortunately now become very commonplace, and it's a real challenge for not just the FBI but state and local law enforcement all over.
Another pressing question is what the FBI knew about the shooter before the incident happened. Florida Republican Matt Gaetz questioned Wray on that.
We did not have any information about the shooter. He was not in our holdings before the shooting.
No communication in any chat rooms, no CIs or confidential human sources have any interaction with?
No, we've run a thorough search for the subject through all of our holdings, and he was not in them anywhere.
Wray made clear that investigations are still ongoing and that the FBI will disclose more information as the probe continues. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And on Capitol Hill, NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley spoke to several members of Congress about how they felt about FBI Director Wray's testimony.
FBI Director Christopher Wray revealing new details about the assassination attempt of former President Trump. It was met with mixed reactions here from members of Congress at the House Judiciary Committee.
I think clearly there were some lapses, but we'll find out more. I think it was right that, what's her name, Cheadle resigned. But I think the FBI is doing what it can.
He appears to be trying to be very forthcoming about what they've found out with respect to the shooting in Butler County, within the bounds of trying to make sure they don't mess up their investigation.
These kinds of hearings are meant to make sure that we as the federal government, are doing the best job we can to protect our candidates, both sides of the aisle. Our democracy depends on it. We have to make sure we have the trust of the people, trust of the nation to make sure democracy works.
And as far as the local law enforcement, what they told you personally, what were they saying?
Not enough communication, not enough coordination. And my line of questionings, I try to again emphasize that I was told by some of the locals quietly, they weren't sure what was going on. And that's not a good statement.
I'll just say violence has never been the answer, and I don't think political parties should be relevant here because it's clear that this did not have to do with political party. The FBI has been handling this investigation with professionalism, and Director Wray has been incredibly forthcoming.
While I may not like everything that the FBI does, and I've certainly criticized surveillance and other things, surveillance of American citizens, I also think it is important to have an agency, a law enforcement agency that is not subject to the whims of the president and is actually politically independent and can follow investigations to the conclusion.
What else can be done by the FBI to prevent future acts of violence like this?
They can just have their intelligence extensive to try to find out if there's somebody out there trying to plan something.
As the FBI continues its investigation into the assassination attempt of former President Trump, there are many unanswered questions left to be resolved. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And Vice President Kamala Harris hits the campaign trail today in Indiana. She addressed an international black women's sorority at their annual convention, where she talked about the focus of her campaign. Harris says she's running for president because the future of the country is at stake.
And now, in this moment, our nation needs your leadership once again. In this moment, I believe we face a choice between two different visions for our nation. One focused on the future, the other focused on the past. And with your support, I am fighting for our nation's future.
Harris also mentioned that if she were elected, she'll continue implementing the programs she and President Biden have created. She told the African American Women's Group that she's not playing around when it comes to fighting for economic and social justice for all Americans. And Fox News has proposed a new debate to the presidential campaigns of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. The proposed date will be at September 17th. No word from either campaign if they've agreed to participate. Next, a voter registration group says that nearly 40,000 people have registered to vote in the last 2 days. This comes after President Joe Biden announced he was exiting the race and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. According to Vote.org, more than 38,000 new voters registered. This marks the highest number of registrations within a 48-hour period for this election cycle. According to the nonprofit voting registration organization, 83% of the new voter registrations were from people aged 18 to 34. They also said these numbers are better than last September. That was when Taylor Swift implored her followers, to register, which saw 34,000 new registered voters in 48 hours. And on a different note, CrowdStrike says a bug in a software update is the cause of last week's global computer outage. The computer crash is causing continued flight delays and cancellations at Delta Airlines, which is slowly getting its operations back to normal.
Delta is still canceling dozens of flights and delaying hundreds more today, according to information from airline tracker FlightAware. In a statement, the air carrier's CEO, Ed Bastian, said he anticipates less delays today than the previous 2 days. Bastian also noted Delta is steadily moving toward fully restoring its operations since the CrowdStrike outage. As Delta works to get back to normal, a stranded and weary passenger who is stuck in Salt Lake City explains what the experience has been like.
In the club room there in Salt Lake City, I tried to get with a service representative. I was given a time of 222 minutes before I could speak to anyone. So I called Delta, and was on hold for over 2.5 hours.
Today, CrowdStrike provided more information about what exactly caused the digital meltdown. In an early post-incident review for its clients, CrowdStrike stated an undetected error in a security upgrade for Windows-based systems was to blame. The cybersecurity company also noted it has a fix that will prevent such a crash from reoccurring, which includes improved testing methods. Once the review is complete, CrowdStrike plans to release the full report to the public.
Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Stephanie Cox. Join Tiffany Meyer for the NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific. See you tomorrow.